Hello, my name's Ken Willett, currently serving as a member of the Ware Select Board and on the Ware Finance Committee. Joining me today is Richard Fly, the chairman of the Finance Committee, and our town manager, Stuart Beckley. This is a segment that's focusing on the operating budget for the town of Ware that's going to be voted at our annual town meeting, which is going to take place June the 8th, 6:30 p.m. at the Ware High School. Now, we have also recorded a little 20-minute show about the town meeting. So hopefully you've watched that show, or after you watch this show, if you haven't, you'll look for that on the Ware Public TV website, and also the link to this show and to the other show will be posted on the Town of Ware webpage and on the Town of Ware Facebook page. At the very start, let me say, the town budget is a somewhat detailed process. We are not going to cover every part of the town budget in the time we have with you today. What we hope to do is to give you a base of information to understand how the town budget gets to the form you see at town meeting, which is the town manager's job, how the finance committee reviewed that, and on behalf of the town of Ware taxpayers gave input to the process and had a dialogue with the town manager. I can speak to how the select board works in that process and works with the town manager and the finance committee to get that budget before you at town meeting. And then to talk a little bit about this particular budget year, what do we see to be the drivers that reflect why the budget this year is more than the budget last year. So again, we're not going to cover everything about the budget, but we're going to try and give you a basic overview and talk about respective roles of the town, the different organizations and people within the town that contribute to that. And then finally to talk about where are the drivers. The town meeting packet is going to be available on May the 29th. That's the packet that will have the articles for town meeting along with the figures that are being asked to be appropriated, which means you vote to move money from a dedicated place into this account so the town can perform that function or service, in this case our operating budget. It's important to understand that our current budget year expires on June the 30th. The budget you will be voting on through Article 18 at the annual town meeting on June the 8th at 6:30 p.m. in the Ware High School, that will be for the period that runs from July 1 of 2026 to June 30th of 2027. Without the town meeting approval of the budget as presented or a form of that budget, the town will be hamstrung in offering its services. Department heads, Stuart will have to review what town meeting has approved for the budget along with the select board and the finance committee. If it's less than what was recommended, then there will have to be decisions made. How do we go forward? But what I want to focus on is the budget as presented by Stuart and already reviewed by the select board and the finance committee that appears in the town meeting packet. So to start it off with, Stuart, can you describe your role in developing the budget and with the department heads, and in particular, what goals did you give the department heads in submitting their requests to you for this coming budget year?
Very good. Sure. So our budget process with the departments typically starts at the end of November into December with a message about what to expect in the coming year. And that's based on, in part, early studies we have available from the state legislature as to how revenues are doing in the state and therefore what we might expect for state aid. This year, recognizing just going to be a very difficult year based on the ability for the town to generate revenue. Proposition 2.5 is a cap on the amount of taxes that can be raised by any community, limiting it to 2.5%. So what we did in December with the initial budget message was to ask departments to provide a level service budget, but also to consider an 8% cut, which I felt would get the town departments to a balanced budget through the process. And so the departments were great. They submitted budgets with that information, indicating where that would cause their department's struggles in the coming year, and making suggestions that was what was needed. We also asked for their thoughts on capital needs, which are equipment or building improvements to get through the year, larger capital long-term that may be necessary, and what they need for taking care of their facilities. And then the process, they do that in January. I work with the departments through February to come up with a budget recommendation that on March 1st can be turned over to the Finance Committee to start their process. And they also talk with the departments.
And Stuart, when we talk about the budget, we do focus on what is available to us through the tax levy, which is where we look at the assessed value of the property, and then we set a tax rate, and that is where the impact of Prop 2.5 comes into play, because we're limited by how the tax levy can go up only by 2.5% year over year.
Right.
But we also take in money above the tax levy to fund our operating budget, most notably state funds. And could you talk, I'll just share with folks, when the governor released her original budget proposal early in 2026, she was recommending that $62.8 billion be given across the state for unrestricted governmental aid. So $62.8 billion across 351 towns and cities to meet their needs and support them. But in Massachusetts, because the governor has her budget, the House of Representatives then prepares its budget recommendation. And the House of Representatives prepared their budget recommendation after the governor's, and they said, no, we want to put $63.4 billion into unrestricted governmental aid. So each time what the state is giving in unrestricted governmental aid, that number changes because of the governor's budget, followed by the House of Representatives budget. And now, has the Senate released a budget yet, Stuart?
The Senate has released a budget which provided more unrestricted government aid and mimicked the House budget, which provided more Chapter 70, which is education aid. So the House and Senate budgets are about $250,000 above what the governor originally proposed.
But Stuart, how does that impact the work you're doing on balancing the needs of the departments against the receipts from the tax levy, as well as the state aid that we receive and others? Every time there's a change, what does that do to what you have to do with your budget worksheet?
So this year is actually different, and I just want to point that out. Traditionally, I try to work with the governor's budget as best we can because it's generally the lowest budget and the most conservative budget. This year, we needed every state aid dollar we had available to provide to the budget. So as it's progressed, and Richard mentioned it in the earlier show, it has been a benefit to have the June town meeting to allow that progression to happen. So we had both the House and the Senate budget. They're still not done. They have to get a compromise budget done, but hopefully that will reflect the higher amounts. But that's allowed us to not have to cut as much, or as you'll hear later, use reserve funds to balance the budget.
So basically, all the budget document is really a work in progress right up to the preparation of the package, correct, Richard?
Correct. And believe me, the cities and towns of Massachusetts have been putting increasing calls to the legislature to do more because they're all facing the same kinds of challenges that we are. Some worse, some lesser, but nevertheless fiscal challenges, and the level of state aid is critical. I mean, for us in Stuart's budget, the budget we'll present at town meeting, the state aid for for our schools and for general government amounts to about $17.2 million,
Right, it's almost half of our
which is
budget.
Yeah.
almost equal to the amount we raise from property and personal taxes, personal property taxes. So in Massachusetts, that's a critical step in towns understanding what they can afford to do in the coming year.
So, as the budget is prepared, and yes, it does take from our tax base, but it also takes from outside sources, and it's cobbling all of that together to come up to a set of numbers that balances and meets the needs of the community and what we need to do. So, Richard, when the Finance Committee looked at the budgets that were presented by the department heads, what was your takeaway about what their shared, what was their understanding of the financial situation of the town, and how did it respect the role of the taxpayer in funding that?
Well, I think I was impressed throughout with the departments coming forward that they had made a real effort at Stuart's behest to have conservative budgets that still enable them to provide the services the town expects. And as I've gone through the budget that we worked through, I mean, the fact is that most of them, we talk about two types of budgets. You can have level services budget, which generally means to keep services, everything goes up in price, that you have to spend more each fiscal year to provide the same level of services. If you have a level spending budget, in many cases you are reducing service levels to reach a spending level. So our goal in this budget year was level services. And I think that the departments generally achieved doing that without driving spending in each of their areas. I mean, as you look through the budget, you can do these numbers yourselves. Our total government spend is pretty much flat from 2026, so from the current year. DPW is down a little, human services is up a little, libraries down a little, parks is down a little. I mean, a lot of these are reducing the purchases of services they make, things that don't necessarily directly affect the services they provide to the population. Our debt and interest is up a little bit because that varies year to year depending on the borrowing we have. So most of the departments are sort of level or slightly down. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yes,
Stuart?
absolutely.
I'll point out that one of the areas where it's not, and for very specific reasons, is public safety. And the public safety budget is up about 5% or about $290,000 from the current year. And that is because we're making investments to make sure all of our firefighter shifts are covered. And we'll talk a little bit more about the public safety, that the police cruisers are up to date and available to serve the community without going down. Some other salaries, the turnout gear for our firefighters, again, our retired fire chief, Ken, will address that. So that's the one department where we've seen some extra spend because we all believe, we've seen recent fires, we know the recent police raids, we know that we need those investments in our public safety program to keep the citizens of Ware safe. So that was a very specific decision. The departments asked, they were reasonable requests, and we were able to meet those pending the approval of the citizens of town. I will point out one other thing, that we had our total town budget is about $1.5 million more than the current year. And that is almost entirely accounted for by the increase in public safety. Our Hampshire County retirement program for our employees was up $327,000, something that every town is running into every year. And our insurance, medical and the health insurance for our town and school employees was up $772,000, or I think that was, what's that, 16%. And we've seen towns that have been looking at 35% increases in some of these programs. It's a huge hit to the budget that requires you to make choices in other areas so that you can balance the budget.
So let's look at those three, I'll use the term drivers, because as you pointed out, Richard, year over year, our budget is up about $1.5 million, but the three areas accounting for the majority of that are insurance, retirement, and then in the public safety arena. Stuart, in those three areas, how much flexibility do you have as town manager to get those numbers down lower?
Great question. Retirement, we have no flexibility. So let's start with that, the Hampshire County Retirement System, which is collected in part from employees' paychecks, but also from the town. It went up significantly this year. What they are trying to do, same as the town is fund their OPEB, their pension the way we fund our OPEB, in terms of trying to have the retirement system fully funded. I think they're up to 2037 or 2038 is their goal to have.
And let's just state that OPEB stands for Other Pension Employee Benefits.
Post-employee benefits. And that,
Okay.
so for the town, it's paying ultimately it would pay the cost of insurance for retirees. In this case, for the county system, it's paying for the retiree pensions of the retirees. So they, in addition to gathering what they have been doing 7 to 10% increases annually in order to meet that. So that, no flexibility. We do save funding on that each year by paying it in the first month, rather than their option is to split into two payments. But that doesn't, it saves us a couple of $100,000 when that's paid in the first month. Health insurance, this year, not much flexibility from Blue Cross, which is our health insurance provider. All providers seem to have very large increases for all. And we, just give a little anti-plug, we don't have the benefit of the GIC that gets some state aid support. So
The
this is all
GIC is
the state's group insurance commission, which funds state employees in many other towns. So we do look at options every couple of years for other providers, and the town of Ware has been twice receiving awards for its creativity, both in how it treats retirees, and then second, we've basically taken on a high deductible plan with a secondary source that pays the deductible. That has saved us a great amount of money, but we're still this year at a 12.3% increase in premiums. Same with the liability insurance, that grows. We do a lot of work to keep the liability down, both in trainings and in building improvements, and the provider does inspections, but it's very limited what flexibility we have in those two drivers.
So, just if I can, Stuart, somebody may say insurance and retirement are based on having staff. And if you got rid of staff, wouldn't that reduce that expense?
Retirement, not so much, because it's people that are in the system. It would reduce it a little bit. Insurance, definitely. The cost of fringe benefits is a huge benefit to town employees. I didn't mention it earlier when I was developing the goal. It is almost always my goal not to reduce staff. It's a last resort. So far, have been able to keep to that in this proposal. So, yeah, it would reduce the insurance costs if we reduced employees.
And our insurance costs, I believe, cover both the town employees and the school department employees for health insurance.
Yes, same.
They have their own teacher retirement program at the schools. But
the insurance is the same system. Yes.
So Stuart talked about the insurance and the retirement, and then Richard also highlighted the fact in the public safety. So I'd like to talk about the public safety, and that's a $290,000 increase over last year. And there's two there's two fundings within that the public safety budget that accounts for that. And let's talk about the fire department. The first is for the fire department. If you have been following, Ware has a very busy fire department. We've had several major fires this year, and most recently on Otis Avenue, a block where 8 families, was it, Stuart?
Eight units.
8 units, an 8-unit apartment block. Close neighborhood, in other words, the buildings are very close. Thankfully, the call came in, the fire department was able to respond. I think there was 2 firefighters on duty, 3?
3, I think.
I think it was 3.
Good response.
And those 3 firefighters, besides being able to respond to the fire that evening, also were responsible for the ambulance if a medical emergency came in. So the situation existed that the fire came in, let's say at 1 a.m. in the morning, had a medical emergency come in at 12:30, 2 of those 3 firefighters would have responded on the ambulance, leaving 1 on-duty firefighter in the station, and then they would reach out to get others, off-duty firefighters, to come in and provide coverage, but they're not right next to the fire station. It's going to take time. And when the fire call came in, it is possible there might have been 1 firefighter in the station to be able to respond to that. That level of activity is taking a toll on the department. It's taking a toll on its ability to serve the residents of Ware, requiring the use of mutual aid to provide ambulance transport, waiting for an ambulance to come from a neighboring community and to take you or your loved one to the hospital. It's depleting the resources that we have available for fire response, and the fire chief has documented that he feels that is putting the town and the firefighters in not the best position from a safety point of view and from a response point of view. And I would ask you to also consider the impact of that on the line firefighters, that they are very busy and they are being called back on a routine basis to provide coverage or to work shift coverage, and we have a very limited pool. How big is the pool of firefighters? Well, we have 4 shifts that are distributed equally to cover the time. So when a shift is working, it's responsible for all fire and emergency medical services call in the town of Ware, or if they're not available, we call mutual aid. We have 2 shifts that have 5 individuals assigned and funded, and we have 2 shifts that have 4 individuals assigned and funded. So we have an imbalance right there. We have 2 shifts of 5, 2 shifts of 4. We have normal churn. We have employees who might be out on extended sick or personal leave. We also have folks who have resigned from Ware to go to other communities, and that creates a further imbalance. So it's the chief's recommendation, and he's made this recommendation for how many years now, Stuart?
3.
Yeah, for 3 years, that we balance out the shifts to 5 per shift for safety, for response efficiency, and to respect the workload against the members of the fire department. He also went after federal grants to fund those 2 positions, twice, I believe, at least, and was unsuccessful twice. This year, it's clear to Stuart, and it's clear to me from what I heard at the Finance Committee, what I know about the demands of public safety in the town of Ware and the demand on the fire department, that even though it's a big move to bring on staff, it's what's needed to provide the town with the service it's come to expect and it really needs as a base level. Many of you might remember Ware at one time had a very active on-call fire department, which are not full-time employees, but employees who were trained but were available to respond when the alarm was sounded. And at one time, I think it was up to 30 some odd individuals. Today, I think that's down to 6. And those 6 are limited in that not all of them are emergency medical technicians and can provide ambulance coverage, but only fire coverage. Now, I'll use this as an opportunity to say that what we are experiencing here in the need for fire department response and the demands of mutual aid and relying on mutual aid is being felt by every community around us. And that feeds into the demand. But Stuart, is it fair to say that what we're experiencing overall in Ware, the pressures we're feeling, are not specific to Ware? It's really happening across the state. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So two responses to that. It's definitely happening. The pressures exist and affects the firefighters. It's also affecting, as different towns recognize the need to address this, finding a shortage of firefighters willing to come to specific towns and or work for specific pays. So it makes it quite challenging to hire and to fill those positions, and more, just as importantly, to keep the people that you hire.
And Richard, I know the Finance Committee looked at this and had a conversation with Stuart. And how did the Finance Committee process this?
Well, I think it was, like I say, the police chief, the fire chief's been asking for this for 3 years. And as the Finance Committee discussed it, we became clear to us that that was something we needed to do now. And if we put it off more, we might be in a situation where we couldn't even afford to do it. Mm-hmm. So what we came up with was hiring those 2 additional firefighters, as the chief had requested, although they probably won't be onboarded until midway through the year. So the budget really reflects a half year for each of 2 firefighters plus their benefits. In addition, we are, and you can talk to what this means, but providing $100,000 for turnout gear, mm-hmm. which is updating the gear that the firefighters get into as they head to a scene. Yeah,
there's some national standards about the firefighter protective clothing is considered viable for 10 years, and after 10 years, that it should be replaced. So the chief has set up a replacement plan and not doing the entire department at one time, but phasing it over multiple years to reduce the impact to the town. And he has sought federal grants for that as well. He has received some grant money for some of the purchases, but now he needs some further replacements. And Stuart has worked with the chief and has put some money into the budget for that. As we talk about an increase from year over year now, I talked about our general budget, 1.5 million over. At town meeting, you'll hear the moderator will go down by department what is being requested. And there's an opportunity to have conversation and to ask questions about it. But I want to echo what the select board, what I as a select board member saw in the budget presentations from the department heads, because I sit on the finance committee as well as when Stuart brought the budget to the select board, is that the department heads have heard the pressures that you, the taxpayer, are facing. They acknowledge it, they know it. They did not come in with any budget requests that are going with some extraordinary level of service or program that will not meet the basic needs of Ware. They are providing the basic needs for Ware. And they continue to do it with the money that's appropriated to them, and they continue to do it with that shared value as town staff, that Ware is the town that can't be licked or won't be licked. And they understand times are tough, and they understand they have to be innovative. They have to be creative. And they have to work with Stuart to get the budget to a number that's affordable for the town. And through that process, we got to that number this year. Now, truthfully, do all of us collectively wish we were under different circumstances, there was a better economy, that there was more money available, that we didn't have such a high dependency on the taxes? But that is Ware. That is who we are today. Before we sign off, we'll talk a little bit about what we can do in the future. But I think we need to talk about where are we today, and what does that mean going forward from Stuart's point of view and from the Finance Committee point of view. And I'll preface it that I'm sure many of you have seen the call by local communities for a 2.5 override. And Proposition 2.5 is what limits the amount of money a community can raise through taxation to 2.5% year over year. And Ware this year bumped up against our levy capacity. That's what we are legally able to raise through taxes. And the Board of Assessors are the ones who set what that is. They base it on the property valuation and the tax rate, and they come up with that number and hand it off to Stuart, and then Stuart backs into that with his budget, and then he accounts for any other outside revenue that comes in, such as state aid and whatnot, to balance it. So Stuart, as you were going through this process this year, and you were trying to close that gap, you discovered a shortfall between the taxes that we're able to levy and the projected outside revenue sources, such as state aid and whatnot, and you had to close that gap. Can you explain what did you have to do this budget year to close? What was that gap, and how did you close it?
Sure. So, in its simplest form, the gap between what is necessary to operate the town and the revenues that are available to it, state aid, local receipts, local taxes, is a bit over $600,000 in terms of operations. So that is the gap in this year's budget. What we did for this year's budget is not pursue an override, and we filled it with what's called free cash, which is surplus cash from the previous fiscal year that's available. We have a fiscal policy that allows the use of free cash for operating budgets up to 35% of the total free cash to be used for operating budget. The issue is the recommendation, free cash is generally a one-time. We address, by planning for that within our fiscal policies, it's allowed, but it's not great practice, doesn't make us feel good, and is certainly not sustainable long-term. And very dependent on what free cash is from year to year, which fluctuates quite a bit. In the past, so this is the 15th budget I've worked on. The first 3 years, we had a deficit that we owed to the school department, but since then, we have not used free cash at all for the balancing the operating budget. So this is a heads up that there's a strong need and a strong shortage.
So Stuart's worked on 15 budgets for the town of Ware. Of that, 3, when he came onto the town, the first 3 needed free cash to balance the budget. But in the 11 budgets since, we have not used free cash. This year, we had to use free cash. And as he said, it's not recommended that free cash be considered a sustainable budget funding source because it's dependent on what's left over from the previous fiscal year. And that's certified by the state. We could have something happen that we don't have a surplus from that fiscal year to carry forward. So it's nice when it happens because we use that. You'll see on town meeting in some of the articles, we're using available free cash to fund some of our small capital purchases and to take care of some other housekeeping matters. But to use it for the operating, but those are optional things. Those are things that the town said we can defer this, we don't need it. But the operating budget is pretty fundamental to who we are as a town and what we want to provide to the citizenry for their services. So free cash or unrestricted cash left over from the previous fiscal year is not the preferred funding source. Richard, what's the finance committee on this particular budget, and how was the discussion with Stuart about the use of free cash and how the finance committee felt about that?
Like Stuart, we were uncomfortable doing it, but the options available to us were limited. We are not prepared at this point to look at an override. We felt that this was the responsible thing to do for the town, while also communicating the message that, as Stuart said, it's not sustainable. We can't rely on free cash to balance our budget year to year. Free cash is there because things happen during a fiscal year that we may not be prepared for or weren't addressed at annual town meeting. So we may come up on a fall town meeting and there's some needs to spend free cash for those. So we begin to limit our ability perhaps to fund other things by subsidizing the budget. That's essentially what we're doing, subsidizing the budget with free cash. So it was a message to us that that we need to be looking as we go forward, how can we retain the level of services? How can we foresee and plan for ways to close the inevitable gaps that are going to appear and not become dependent on free cash to do that? This is a long-term strategy. So we've solved it this year. Who knows? Maybe the next fiscal year it will be possible to do the same thing without using too much free cash. But we are approaching a serious situation, as towns are throughout the Commonwealth. I saw that Boston was taking $70 million from their rainy day fund to balance their budget this year, and they obviously have a much bigger $1 billion
rainy day fund
budget and a bigger rainy day fund, but communities across the state are running into the same thing, and all will be struggling with the idea of how do we do this? When is it right to ask the citizens' opinion on whether we should do an override? How can we manage our free cash in a way that is responsible for the town? So this was, I don't want to say this was an easy budget, but if it is, it's maybe the last easy budget for a while.
Correct. And just another impact of using free cash for operating is that 600,000 is now not available for capital. And we've, in past 10 or so years, had a very successful capital improvement process. So in this, I'm not saying it cuts it off, but it's $600,000 that could be used for other things.
If I can, Stuart, Article 26 on the warrant is the bucket truck.
Yes.
And Stuart, this is for the Department of Public Works, and it's the truck that has the articulating hydraulic boom with the bucket that's used by DPW to do forestry work, tree limbing. And we also use it in town to help hang Christmas decorations and do other things that's important to the town. But the truck boom failed the safety inspection that's required for it to be utilized safely by town staff. So that got flagged. The truck is old. It's over 15 years old, is it, mechanical? But it's in decent mechanical and structural shape. It's not terrible, it's decent. But the request was
$235,000.
The original request was $235,000 from free cash.
For a new truck.
For a new truck. At the Finance Committee and at the Select Board level, in conversation with Stuart, the conversation turned to maybe that's what we'd like to have. What must we have to be safe? And the conversation focused on replacing the boom on the truck and ensuring it's safe, which is an acceptable response to that. That came in at $52,000 as opposed to the higher number. Now, truthfully, would the town departments rather have had the brand new vehicle? Absolutely. But in conversation and looking at what the town's financial forecast looks like and the drawdown on free cash, and to reduce some of the pressure on free cash, the decision was made to go with the replacement, and that's what will be. That's also part of the dialogue that takes place behind the scenes between the town manager, the finance committee, and the select board. So I use that as an example. That dialogue I just shared with you may not be discussed at town meeting. You will only see the request for the $50,000, but I'm sharing that with you to let you know that the budget is looked at very carefully, and it's looked at in detail, and there's hard discussions back and forth. To Richard's point, these conversations are probably going to get harder in the coming years. We talked about the override word. We are aware overrides are not popular. Overwhelming, it's about a 50-50 split in Massachusetts. Communities that pass overrides against communities that don't pass overrides. Where, I think it was 4 years ago, Stuart, the underride?
Yes.
4 years ago, Ware voted what's called an underride. The underride took $400,000 off of our levy. At that time, we were in a good financial position. Things looked good for us. The economy looked good. And the voters decided that we would remove that $400,000 from the levy. So when we look at our levy today versus where it was 4 years ago, and trying to maintain level services, 4 years ago, we had access to a little more money in our levy capacity, which is the amount of money we could raise through taxation, than we do today. Couple that with the outside pressures coming onto the budget by increased costs, as we mentioned with insurance and with retirement, but also personally, we all know the cost of fuel has gone up. Anybody that's gone to Lowe's or to Tractor Supply and purchased anything lately, something that cost $1.50, maybe, I don't know, 4 months ago, is now $1.75. Well, multiply that by all of the things that the town utilizes in conducting its daily operations. Not saying what's right or what's wrong here, but just to let you know that we're in a changing environment. And this year, having to draw upon free cash is kind of like checking the weather forecast before you go on vacation. You check the weather forecast and say, what am I going to pack? What am I going to wear? How long am I going to stay there? Well, the drawdown of free cash for the operating budget was like looking at the weather forecast for the town of Ware and seeing a thunderstorm on the horizon when we were hoping to be wearing a tropical shirt. It's going to change the way we have to go forward. Now, whether that's a good change or a bad change will be up to the voters. The voters will make that decision. But it is the job of the town manager, the finance committee, and the select board to present to you what we feel is the appropriate thing for the town, and then you decide. It is your budget, it's your vote, and we need you at town meeting on June 8th at 6:30 p.m. in the high school. I want to, I was remiss when I talked about the public safety increase in that I did not mention the police cruisers. I talked about the 2 firefighters. The police chief has developed a cruiser replacement plan, and of all the vehicles we have in town, the police cruisers probably put the most mileage on in the shortest amount of time. And they're critical. They operate in the hot, they operate in the cold. They operate in water, they operate in snow. They go fast, they go slow. They idle for long periods of time. So all of those things contribute to the wear and tear, and it's in the town's best interest from a liability point of view, from a health and safety point of view for the police officers, that we maintain a periodic replacement program for cruisers. We were supposed to fund 2 cruisers at the last special town meeting, correct, Stuart?
Yes.
But we chose not to because we didn't have the finances certified to do that. So this purchase, this request in the police budget to fund 2 cruisers is to get the chief back on track with his replacement schedule. And it was delayed about a half a year. And it's what is needed for the police department to provide the resources the town demands and the town needs in a safe and effective manner. So again, going back to the public safety increase for this year of $290,000, $140,000 is for 2 police cruisers, and $110,000 was for the 2 firefighters for 6 months. That's $250,000 right there out of a $290,000 increase. And the balance is due to increase in collective bargaining, approved wages, and supplies that are needed to perform the duties. So.
Very good.
And there are other small capital items that
There
we're
are.
looking at as well.
Yeah,
There are.
Yeah, the turnout gear.
Yeah, the turnout gear, the
IT
100,000.
gear, and $70,000 for school books.
Yep, 70,000. Oh, can we talk briefly about the school budget as we close out? Because everybody always sees the school budget as a source of discussion. And I'll share with the community that Stuart and I echo this, and I believe the Finance Committee does too. It's a single town budget. It's not a school budget and a town budget. It's a single town budget. And this is part of the fabric of services we provide to make Ware Ware. So we've taken that, adopted that policy, and the schools have been active participants in working to get to a budget figure that is agreeable to Stuart and to the Finance Committee and the Select Board. And I'm going to ask Stuart to talk a little bit about that process this year and how it went.
Yep, thank you. It's important to say that historically, and this year included, that the Ware School District is incredibly cooperative, just like all the other departments, in understanding the limits to the overall town budget and providing a budget that matches, and then working with me and then the Finance Committee to agree to a budget that they can work with and can be presented to town meeting. And this year was the same. Mr. Wood made just a fantastic presentation on his budget, demonstrating their goals. I do encourage that is also on Ware Community Access TV, their budget hearing, and it's a great presentation on what they're planning on moving forward. So it's a very reasonable budget. It's under 3% increase overall, similar to, if you took out the drivers that we were talking about, particularly the retirement and the insurance, both the town, it's, overall we're at 5%, but you take those out, both the town and the schools are, right around 3% increases in terms of operations. So the school provides a very detailed spreadsheet. Mr. Wood did a great job going past the detail to a vision, and I think it's very worthwhile to support.
And one of the challenges this year is that our Chapter 70 state aid is, I believe, based on the figure that I've seen, is up only about 1.3% from last year.
Right, and that's important to note. Ware was treated very well by the Student Act for several years. Student Opportunity Act, thank you, for several years, 4 or 5 years. But both the school department and I could see a plateau coming. That plateau arrived.
Because that program is running out.
Yeah, and that's where we're going to be, I think, for a few years, unless Chapter 70 is revamped.
Exactly, and as you said, the net school spending, so the basic education budget for the Ware Public Schools, holding out what goes to Pathfinder Tech, what is the high expense for transportation, was only up 1.6%. And I know the school committee, the school community would like to do better than that, because Ware is looking to continually improve. But under the circumstances, they found the ways to improve, yet to hold their costs fairly steady.
Yes.
So I want to wrap this up, and I want to say that what we tried to provide tonight is some context on Article 18 primarily, which is the budget article at town meeting. But there are 34 articles at town meeting. They each deserve your thoughtful review and discussion and vote as to how you feel. But my goal was to provide some insight into the process of how the budget is prepared. When it's only seen as a document once a year, it seems kind of abstract, and you kind of wonder, well, did they do this through AI? No, we didn't do it through AI. But you wonder, how did we get there? And it's people. It's people talking about providing service to people, that's you, the residents of Ware, working with the town manager and forecasting how they can meet those needs in a reasonable and cost-effective manner. With the Finance Committee people looking at it and providing guidance along with the Select Board. But the most important person in this whole equation is you, the taxpayer and the voter of Ware. And while we all agree, as I said earlier, we wish it was a different circumstance. We wish we didn't have to raise taxes. We wish we had a larger industrial base. Well, here's what we're looking to do in the coming year. We have an active project underway to look at the Mill Yard, the Healthcare District, and the Main Street District to come up with a redevelopment plan. We're making a major infrastructure improvement on East Main Street in the vicinity of the Stone Mill to upgrade the in-ground utilities and to address some of the needs of the tenants along those streets to have dedicated utilities available to them so that they can improve their businesses. So we're looking at that. We're engaging in that activity. You know, we're going to be tearing down a building on Main Street that suffered a fire and hasn't been resolved. We're not waiting for the property owner to do that any longer because we think that's an eyesore and is an impediment to making property available for development. So we're going to, using money that's appropriated at a previous town meeting, take that down to further the development potential. But we're not there yet. It's going to be a journey. Some of the good news, we've had a Tractor Supply come in. We've had people who've talked about maybe doing some multiple housing developments, but those haven't progressed beyond the discussion stage. But we have to find a way to engage town resources to get the information out there to people that Ware is open for development. And you know what? It's a pretty good town. When you think about, you've got Route 9, you've got Route 32, you've got not one lumber yard, you got two. You got Home Depot, I'm sorry, not Home Depot, Lowe's and Tractor Supply. You got a Walmart, you got two grocery stores, you got medical practices, you got dental, you got gas stations, banks, liquor stores, restaurants. We've got a lot of opportunity here for people to come to this town and take advantage of what we have, but more importantly, to build on what this town is and to get more development here. You can help with that. When given the opportunity to talk about Ware and to talk about the good things in Ware and how living in Ware is a great opportunity, and we have things happening. We have Workshop 13. We have great, we have the two brew pubs that have opened. We have a lot of things going on. Your help in promoting that can get the word out there and help us develop Ware to take pressure off the taxpayers through just the tax base. So your help is needed. But the most important thing is, Richard, what are we asking people to do as we sign off?
Come to town meeting on June 8th, 6:30 p.m. in the high school auditorium.
And can everybody attend town meeting, Stuart?
It is open to everyone.
But can everybody vote at town meeting?
You have to be a registered Town of Ware voter.
Okay, you have to be a registered Town of Ware voter. So, folks, thanks for making some time available to learn a little bit about what went into making this year's Town of Ware budget, in particular Article 18. Thanks for paying attention to town meeting. We look forward to seeing you there. And please, if you have questions, reach out to us. Stuart's available through the town website, as am I as a member of the select board. And Richard as the chairman of the finance committee. Be glad to answer your questions so that you will be an informed voter when it comes to town meeting. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.